Okay, my name's Andrew Wisdom. I'm the moderator for this experiment, I guess. Is it an experiment? I don't know. We'll see how we go. It'll be great. What we're trying to achieve today is just to explore what it's like in a heatwave in 2025. Slightly different situation than we've had before, but pretty similar to what we do have. But first thing I want to do is to acknowledge that we're meeting on the lands of the Kulin Nations and pay my respect to their elders past and present. Important we do that whenever we meet in Melbourne. So we've got a big panel here. The panellists are drawn from all sorts of different parts of the world, different kinds of experience, levels of expertise, and so on and so forth. Some of them are playing themselves, as you'll discover as we go through. Some of them are playing characters that are not themselves. And that's kind of part of the fun. We're forcing people out of the comfort zone. Somebody, Claire, I think you said you feel like you're out of your comfort zone, right? Which is a great thing. It's really good to be out of your comfort zone as much as you possibly can be. So this hypothetical is about heat. And it's probably kind of appropriate on a day like today. Was it 31 today, I think, in March, that we have a hypothetical about heat. Last week, City of Melbourne released a report about the economic impact of the heat wave we had in January. $37 million it cost businesses in the CBD as a result of that heat wave. Today is the IPC has released its latest report, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So it's January 2025. We have to start putting ourselves into that space right now. Australia's experiencing an intense El Nino. We've had those before. We had a drought from 97, 2008, I think. That was a result of an El Nino. We think, actually, another El Nino is about to hit in 2015, but we don't know that for sure. In 2025, we are in the middle of an El Nino. 5 years it's been running. And the Bureau of Meteorology's heatwave forecast tool points to a major heatwave heading straight towards us. And so we're preparing. What's it like in 2025? Well, for a start, it's hotter. The forecast is these were released, this is the IPCC analysis released today. In 2025, it's about getting close to a degree warmer than it is now. And the degrees are not insignificant amount. So heading towards a degree means we've got an elevated risk of floods, of heat waves, and so we're concentrating on a heat wave for this hypothetical. At the moment, we get about nine days a year over 35 degrees. By 2025, or by 2030, we're expecting somewhere between 11 and 13, heading up towards 15 to 26. So our climate is going to be more like Adelaide's. And this year we had, was it 4 days over 41, I think, which was a record for Melbourne. That same heat wave yielded, I don't know if you can remember what it was like in Adelaide, but it was 8 days over 42, or between 42 and 45. It was just correspondingly hotter. That's what Melbourne is heading towards. That's the kind of climate we are heading for. So what does that mean? How do we cope with all of that? So the Bureau of Meteorology has done looks at a range of forecasts. This is a forecast they've made for January 21, 2025. Yellow is warm, orange is very hot, red is forget about it, very hot. And you can see there's a little blob just over the top of Melbourne, just to the north of Melbourne. What we had this year was worse than that. So this isn't actually a particularly extreme forecast for 2025. So we're not really going too far. We're not being unrealistic about what's ahead for us. The CSIRO have had a look at what we're suggesting, and they're happy that this represents a reasonable pitch at what it's like to be in 2025. Okay. Day one. We're off. It's 2025. We're heading towards a maximum of 42.8 after a cool 18.3, not too bad. Anything under 20, I think I can sleep pretty well. So it's clear and hot, not a breath of wind blowing. Dead still. So, Cathy Oak, Premier of Victoria. It's a challenging time. 6 days in a row over 40 is being forecast. It's going to be a real test of the resilience of our systems and of our community and so on and so forth. What do you see as the big challenges for us?
Well, as Premier of this great state of ours, we have experienced many days of heat this summer, but we're as the Bureau has just predicted, we're about to experience a lot more, and they're going to be a lot hotter. We have enacted our emergency management systems. We've coordinated or brought together under the Emergency Management Victoria controlling body who looks after all of our emergency services. They will be in charge of the operations that may unfold over the next few days. It's really important that over the last 10 years we've been collaborating with local government, with the community sector, with individuals to create our own individual resilience plans. People should know what to do in a heat wave, community should know, local government should know, and hopefully a lot of that research, that work, the engagement plans that we've got in place will unfold, and as a state we should get through this next 10 days or 6 days.
So you're relying on a community that is well informed, motivated to look after themselves.
That's right.
That's a key plank. Okay, so Dean. So Dean Griggs is a volunteer at the Carlton Neighbourhood Learning Centre. And he lives with his elderly mother in a public housing block. Okay, so the Red Cross is phoning at-risk residents 3 times a day to check they're all right. Okay, so that's a bit of support that's there. And there are extended openings at some government facilities. The Carlton Heat app tells people where it's hot. So we've got an app that tells us what the temperature's like. What's it like for you? How are people responding to the Premier's drive for personal responsibility and so on?
Oh, look, we do what we can. The app, I think, in terms of where the hotspots are, it's probably got my place mentioned right on it because it's bloody hot at my place. It's incredibly warm. We don't really listen to the government warnings all that much. We just sort of stick together as a community. As a family, we do what we can. We try to stay hydrated and drink a lot of water and go to the beach when we can. Stick together as a community and give each other, look after each other's kids. If someone needs to go to the beach during the day, we'll help each other out. It's difficult, but we're getting through it. And the main thing I'm worried about is my mum, because she's 80 and it's really hot, and we nearly lost her last summer. So, and my wife and I both work, so we're not home during the day, and I don't know what's going to happen if I come home one day and she hasn't had that phone call from the Red Cross.
So what do you do as a family then? I mean, given that you're concerned about it, how do you cope with that? What do you do?
Look, we rely on our neighbours, I suppose. We've got a pretty tight-knit floor that I live on the in the high-rise, and we do what we can to sort of support each other, and hopefully someone will come and visit, but I can't guarantee because we all have to work, so, Mum can be home on her own, but we do, try and cook for each other or share air conditioners, or if someone's air conditioner breaks, we'll go over to their place or they'll come to our place. So
yes,
we try to stick together.
Okay, so you're okay. You've got a nice community. What about you, Joel? Joel's a homeless mother. She has a 3-month-old baby. You've worked in the past, but you're not working at the moment. Tell us about how you cope with the day.
So I do have a 3-month-old baby. We are homeless, so we usually go to shopping centres during the day, or we go to the park, or we go to a playgroup. But in the heat situation, I really fear for the safety of my 3-month-old, because as we know, the elderly and infants are more prone to heat stress than anyone else. So I am really scared, and I do fear for my child.
So what are you going to do today? What's the deal?
What are we going to do today?
It's going to be 42.8 today, 3 o'clock.
I think we might go to the local shopping centre where it's nice and cool, and if we can, maybe to the swimming pool, and spend as much time as we can there, because we don't know where we're going to go when business hours are over. Yeah,
right. So, Premier, is it possible that the swimming pools could be kept open until, I don't know, midnight or something like that? Is that possible?
Oh, absolutely. As we've worked with councils across the state, and when we first started experiencing long heat waves, 10, 15 years ago, local councils responded incredibly well and incredibly quickly to the community's needs for free access to places like swimming pools, and creating spaces that are free to that are cool and welcoming, and so that all of the community can feel safe.
Okay, so Joel, you find a place for tonight. There's no air conditioning. Your baby's getting a little bit distressed now, so what do you do?
I think we're in for a sleepless night. We're definitely in for a sleepless night, and I guess we've got fans. That's all we've got. We've got water and we've got fans. So we'd have cool bath for baby when I feel that she's getting too distressed, and just wet face washes and a cool fan is all we can.
Best you can hope for.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Okay, Martin Dutch, doctor in the emergency department at Royal Melbourne Hospital. Years of experience. You've seen this before, right? Tell us about what do you expect? So,
what we can normally sort of expect. So we often have heat waves. What we know is that it's not just the community that heats up, it's the healthcare service that heats up during a heat wave. There's a structured plan for responding to heat waves in Victoria. So we know that basically we can expect to see substantially more workload across the healthcare system when the average temperature increases to about 30 degrees. And our first day of the heat wave is the first day that we start seeing more work. It's not just emergency departments, it's ambulances, it's general practitioners, it's the coroner's office, it's birth, deaths and marriages recording deceased people. Certainly it's been documented we'll expect to see more people pass away during a heat wave than what we'd do in another year at the same time of the year. And mainly that increased mortality or increased number of deaths almost solely occurs in people over 75. So while lots of people are concerned about young people, that the sort of stats and the evidence would suggest to us that it's the elderly people who are in really significant trouble. Certainly after 65 years of age, but certainly after 75 is when the mortality really increases in that group. And the interesting thing, looking forward or looking back, the 2025 number, we'd be expecting to see double the number of people over 85 years of age than what we have in the current year. And we'd be expecting to see substantial increases, sort of 80% increase in people aged 65. So as a proportion of the population, our at-risk group is increasing. And
is part of the risk to do with the fact that they're isolated? Is that?
Yeah, so there's lots of sort of social trends that determine overall population health, but certainly I think there's a trend towards increasing social isolation. We know that during previous heat waves, up to 30% of people over 75 years of age have no other contact with another person during that heat wave, not a telephone call, not a friend or a relative who drops in. They sit there in their hot house, isolated alone for the duration of the heat wave.
What a shocker. Lucky the Red Cross are operating, right? And lucky that you've got you and your wife looking after your mother. Okay, thanks, Martin. So, Mary Farrow, you are a resident of Emerald. You've been given a stay-ago advice 4 times in the last 6 weeks. Okay, so this isn't an isolated event. 4 times in the last 6 weeks, residents in the peri-urban area have had to decide whether to stay or go.
Right. Oh, okay.
So tell us what you do when that happens.
Well, we've been listening to the fire messages. It's been 10 years, and it's finally getting into our head. And I want to know, hands up, who's going to be putting us up? Because we're coming to your town. We're bringing the horse trailer. We're bringing the caravan because we're leaving early. So we will be swinging by to pick you up. You'll have to give us your address because we're going to camp out on the river and we're not expecting to be asked to move along because we're doing the right thing. We're leaving early. Our power's gone off in the hills because that's what happens when we have heat. And who can blame SB Osnet for turning the power off? It causes fires and it then causes lawsuits. I'm from California. I know how that works. So we have to be careful with that. But we understand we have to leave. Our phones don't work. Our messaging is not working. The towers aren't working because the battery has run out, the backup battery. So we have to come to town.
So that's what you do? You come to town?
We come to town. And so we'll be looking for, a bushfire rate and some of the accommodation. That's what we'd like to have that. We think that would be a good thing. It's a neighborly thing to do. We're coming down from the Mitchell. We're coming down from the Murrindindi. We're coming down from the Dandenongs.
So everybody's heading towards the city, right? It's an exciting prospect.
Is that part of everybody's plan? They're here? We're all going to accommodate us. Okay, good.
So in fact, the problems are even worse than normal this time because there's been a problem with the power distribution system and all power to country zones has been switched off, just bam, off, right? There's no power in the peri-urban area of the city at all. So 5,000 of you and your mates are coming towards the city, right?
That's right.
5,000.
And our horses, and our goats, and our chickens.
Now, interestingly, analysis of heat waves, what happens in heat waves in Chicago back in 1995 and also in the 1930s, showed that people just went to the rivers, went to somewhere where there's some cool water, which you might do, right? Okay, so we'll just bear that in mind for a minute. So, Ariel, where are you? Ariel, very good. Okay, Ariel's a researcher at Monash University on how do we describe it? Actually, I'll give you your full title. Senior Research Fellow and Director of Carbon and Energy Programs at the Monash Faculty of Information Technology. You know about power systems, right? It's 2025 now, how's it different now from how it was 10 years ago? Do people have their own sources of power? Is battery technology there to allow people to keep on operating even when the power goes off and so on and so forth?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. Luckily, for the last 11 years, people like Terry and his company and the Premier and all her colleagues at the other states and the federal government have been working together with the assistance of some independent advice from the universities to try and understand how better to set up the rules of the energy game to make sure that the best technologies, the most economically efficient technologies come to the fore. That means batteries, where they're economic, will be adopted by people, partly because they think it's a good idea, but partly because it's affordable, in combination with solar and other generation technologies, maybe even little wind turbines on top of every house or in every yard. And so actually the electricity system, or the energy system, because energy also includes gas and your vehicle's energy, which now comes from petrol, but in the future it'll be electric as well. So all these things together can work much more resiliently, and that means they actually compensate for each other's shortcomings. So we're of course getting ready for this was a long-term plan as well, so the rules and the regulations and policies were set up such that there were no barriers to uptake of distributed energy and solar and batteries and so forth. In fact, some incentives for that were created because it was seen this is actually a net benefit to society and the economy. So it may be a cost up front, but in the long run, it's actually going to both save lives and money.
Okay, so there is technology around to keep people's lights on and all that kind of jazz, even when things are on. Mary, what do you do? Do you even...
No. This is all too tidy here. All the dots are connected, man. The power goes out because everybody's got their air conditioning on because our resilience is pretty flabby. And we run it to the point where the power goes out, so there's just no power. We haven't got solar up in the Dandenongs, we've got too many trees. Hopefully there's still some trees there. We haven't been made so safe that we have no trees and we move out of the Dandenongs.
It's 2025. Do you have your solar PV? And
No, absolutely not, because we've got too many trees, so we don't take it solar.
No good.
There's no power.
It's a nice idea.
When there's no power, we got to come down to the city.
Okay.
Because we got to get out of there. We have to.
Nice idea. Thanks,
High
Ariel,
risk.
but forget it.
Lots of us.
Okay.
And we're driving fast, and we're pulling horse trailers.
Okay.
As Ariel said, the state government has invested significantly in distributed energy systems and precinct-wide approaches to managing energy and getting as many people as we can in the ability to be off the grid if possible. Unfortunately, the program hasn't reached to Emerald, and we apologise for that. But in the future, we hope that the peak energy use and management of when we use our air conditioners and our facilities that cool our houses or cool our cities will be a lot better, but we understand that it's not perfect yet, and it's something that we're working on, but we have invested significantly in this area.
Okay, brilliant. Radio. That's the end of day one. Pretty good, okay? We're coping all right. No problem so far. Okay, day two. Maximum 41.7, minimum after an overnight 28.6. What a shocking night. Okay. So the Fire Commissioners warned us about extreme risk of grass fires and bushfires coming up. So, Claire Johnson's a New Docklands resident. Her husband looks after their baby daughter in their apartment on the level 20 of their nice shiny New Docklands tower. So analysis from Monash University shows that not all parts of the city are equally at risk. Some parts of the city get hotter than other parts. What are the advantages? What are the natural advantages for Docklands in this sort of situation?
Well, of course, the reason I bought there in the first place is because I have a north-facing waterfront apartment, and whilst I'll be working for the rest of my life to pay it off, I do have a lovely view, and I do capture the ocean breeze, and so for me that's a lovely part of the reason why I live where I live. And I also find that it makes me use less of my cooling and power, because I do have the ability to have my windows open and secure that nice breeze coming through.
Okay, so that's one of the good things about Docklands. So Martin was saying before about the effect of isolation, and that certainly was the result of research, certainly in Chicago. Isolated people. Tell us about isolation in Docklands.
Well, it's funny because you can be on your own, or you can be in a community of 15,000 people. So where I live at Victoria Harbour, I live in a 530 unit building, and so I'm on the 20th floor, and I have at least 12 apartments on my floor, and so I can not see anybody for days, or I can see anybody I want to. And I'm lucky that we do at Docklands have the community forum, so we have quite a tight-knit group of people. Of course, there is a substantial population down there, and people like the anonymity, but people also like to be part of a community. So it is a choice that you make, but there are all sorts of problems when situations emerge and you don't know who's actually living in your building.
What about the owners' corporation? I mean, there's an owners' corporation, I assume, for your building. Are you active in that, and is it an active entity, or is it just doing things like
it's certainly an
facilities?
active entity, but as you can imagine, with 530 sort of apartments and over 1,000 people who live there, the spaces are limited and participation is limited. So we're lucky we have a concierge and a property manager who provide us with information. What we also have is smart metering on our buildings and within our apartments, so messaging gets through quickly in real time, but we don't necessarily or physically connect to understand what's going on in our building.
Okay, what about the 30 apartments on the top 4 floors occupied by Chinese residents who don't speak English at all? How do those guys integrate, and how do they cope? How do they get them?
It's interesting, and it's a diverse building that I live in, and it's not just the Chinese immigrants that we have. We have many Indian students who live in our buildings, and we also have some elderly people. We have some retirees from Glen Iris, so we have a very sort of mixed and diverse community. The language barrier is a concern if I stop back and think about how do we deal and how do we help people in difficult situations, and we really struggle to identify who has language problems and in the building who is responsible for the communications of those people, and our concierge does the best that they can, but you can never be quite sure that you've got people, and you wouldn't know where to find people necessarily if you did have to go and try and communicate with them.
Yeah, well, I'll come back to that in a bit. So, Premier, water storage is very low. We've been 5 years into a drought, right? So things are pretty grim on the waterfront. We're down to 20%. So people had drummed into them for the last, 5 years, about 155 litres per person, saving water, all that kind of jazz. Do you moderate that message now? Do you change that message for them and give them the heat wave?
It's very important that people stay well hydrated and reduce the incidences of heat stroke or effects of the heat wave. But it's also important that we manage the water sources, and Melbourne Water and our catchment management authorities are part of our coordinated response across all levels of government and across the community. And they'll be managing. There are some areas that we have water and some areas that we don't, and we need, obviously in emergencies we can move water around. But as we have adopted local water management plans over the last 10 years, we have got a lot better in the way that we use and store water, and yes, but we do need to make sure that people are sensible and use common sense and drink water if they need to, but maintaining water for fire services and for managing the bushfire risk is also important.
Sounds like Mary has something to say.
Of course, the Cardinia Reservoir is a big storage water for Melbourne, and of course we probably have a bushfire up there by now, so that water is now being impacted.
Yeah,
now what?
We might come to that. Okay, so Ian Shears, Manager Urban Landscape, City of Melbourne. You're responsible for the urban forest. Can you just tell us about, first of all, the urban forest, and tell us about its impact on the urban heat island effect?
The urban forest is something that has been recognised as being incredibly important for the city, and earlier Millennium Drought and other heat waves sort of enabled council to recognise that responding to these challenges, working with nature rather than against it, was a really smart thing to do. We've worked out that trees are incredibly effective air conditioners, for example, and that having really good tree canopy cover in combination with open space and permeability is a significant way to reduce urban temperatures. So the City Council, in conjunction with a forward-thinking state government, has worked with surrounding councils to establish a series of cool parkways throughout the city. And probably the jewel in the crown of that is the Elizabeth Street linear parkland. And there we've actually removed all of the asphalt. We've daylighted the creek, and so we've got a wonderful linear space that is cooler by up to 10 degrees than surrounding areas. So when we have how we welcome our country cousins down to the city to spend time, we've got a space that's cool, that's nice, that's inviting, and it's a communal space, so people don't need to feel isolated in their apartment buildings. They can come out, and the recognition of the open space strategy, we've got a cool space within 300 metres walking distance of everybody throughout the city. So it's a fundamentally important green infrastructure approach that it recognises the environmental service benefits of what nature can do, and uses that to respond to the heat island.
So how many degrees difference does it make? Have you got any idea of what the temperature would be out in the asphalt versus underneath in this Elizabeth Street Creek?
Look, I mean,
way?
We put a lot of energy into understanding the science and getting the data right, and our thermal imagery indicates that beneath the shade of a healthy tree that's transpiring well, it's half that of out in the asphalt. And further to that, the city's recognised that dark black asphalt absorbs a lot of heat during the day, so we've put a lot of research and development into much cooler colours so that we're not sheeting blackness everywhere. We're actually putting a lot better albedo effect and reducing it. So it's not only the grey infrastructure, the green infrastructure is all working towards reducing urban temperatures and responding to the health and well-being of the community.
I love one of my favourite places now is that Elizabeth Street Creek. Remember when the trams used to run down there? No. Lovely creek, trees growing over. So we've been in drought for 5 years, right? So has that had an impact on how the urban forest has been developing?
Look, and certainly the water is fundamental to growing the forest that we want, and for the transpiration. And we recognise that the cooling is an effect of the evaporation, the transpiration that is part of that natural forest process. But like natural forests, we've recognised that we need rainfall, and we need to actually grab hold of that rainfall when it falls. So we're moving away from that past practice of rainfall falling onto an asphalt or paved surface going to a pipe and being pumped out into the bay. We know that more rain falls on Greater Melbourne than is used by Melburnians throughout the year. So we've moved away significantly from that reliance on potable water from our dam storage, and we're now using stormwater harvesting systems to capture the water, clean it, and have it available throughout our urban spaces.
So it's been going now for, when it was launched in 2013, I think, 12 years ago. So is the forest there now, or is it, I remember growing up, there were plane trees everywhere and lovely elms and so on and so forth, which I assume there aren't many of those left right now.
Look, certainly we've recognised that a lot of the existing trees that were planted 100, 120, 130 years ago aren't with us now, or they're really significantly declining. So the work that we've done is to ensure that where we've got opportunities to plant now in recognition of the loss that's going to occur, we've done that. So for the past 10 plus years, we've been planting several thousand trees a year, and also putting them in places where we didn't have trees previously, and recognising that our roads are essential public realm spaces that need to provide much more than just a space for a car to go down. It's got to provide space for water absorption, place to grow trees, place for people to ride their bikes and to walk.
Yeah, right. Okay, great. So, Premier, I seem to be harping on you, but you're kind of the focus of a lot of the decision making here. So two young children die in a car in a car park. They are locked in there while the parent was inside shopping. It's such a stupid thing to do, right? But people are starting to panic now. Like, things are really bad. What message can you send to people right now? How can you calm people down and tell to reinforce that idea of self-responsibility and so on and so forth.
Yeah, obviously it's incredibly sad that these 2 children have died, and unfortunately every year that we have a heat wave there are these deaths, and unfortunately they do seem to still occur, but I believe that we've done a lot better in our engagement processes with the community and acknowledging that there is an individual role, a community role and a government role to play in managing our response to heat wave. I know that the state is sweltering right now, and that we are at buckling point. We've been in this heat wave for a few days now, but the Emergency Management Victoria is coordinating our response incredibly well. The Office of Living Victoria is managing how we're managing our water resources, and our transport facilities. Whilst they are at stress, we have invested a lot of money in the infrastructure, and we've invested a lot of money in making their networks work a lot better. But so I'd like to stress that the state is with the community, but to follow the community, our individual and our community heat response action plans would be a great way of making sure that we're all working together and coping in this heat wave.
Okay, nice and neat. Everything's going pretty well. Unfortunately, Mary and her 5,000 of her friends, closest friends from Emerald, don't cut the microphone.
10,000 now.
10,000 of her closest friends have formed a caravan of caravans. So they've hitched up their trailers, hitched up their horses, hitched up their caravans, and they've descended on the city. And as Premier, you've decided that you're going to designate a zone for them to stay in. So you've nominated Fitzroy Gardens and Birrarung Ma as the place for them to go. And the reason you've done that is because as part of the urban forest strategy, I was surprised you didn't mention this actually. As part of the urban forest strategy, there's a little detector on each tree, so we know exactly not only how that tree is performing, but also what the temperature and humidity environment is underneath that. And that's how we know where the cool zones are. And Fitzroy Gardens and Birrarung Ma, right here, is one of those zones. So you nominate that. So what services do you need to put in place to allow these guys to flourish in that situation?
Yes, there will be toilets there. No, we will enact our heat wave management. I can't remember what it is. The community heat wave action plan, and cool spaces around the city that have been identified, such as Birrarung Ma and Fitzroy Gardens, will already. In fact, you should see that the infrastructure's already been installed. There are toilets. There is communication facilities so that people can let their loved ones know where they are and how they're going. There is a data facility providing real-time information about what the weather is doing and when it may be getting better for everyone. There is we have the emergency responses through the hospitals, through St John's ambulance. We have the SES volunteers helping us in these gardens as well. And this has all been coordinated through the City of Melbourne, and I would like to thank the Lord Mayor for her cooperation and her help, and I think that we have a lot to thank of this great City of Melbourne and their approach to the heat wave.
So just so we're clear, it's not like New South Wales where Clovermore is both the Premier and the Lord Mayor. It's two different people, right?
It's two different people.
Yep. Okay.
But we understand that the peri-urban communities have come into our city, and as the manager of urban landscapes from the City of Melbourne has detailed, the heat in urban spaces like the city is very hot as well, and there are people in our community that we also need to work with in our high-rises and in especially that we need to make sure that we're looking out for our neighbours, and we need to make sure that we're everyone has made sure that the person that lives next door that you may not have seen out in the street, make sure that they're okay. So again, it's about implementing our individual heat wave resilience action plans and making sure that your neighbours are well, and that the community is that is coping as well as possible.
Yeah, good. Dean, you can say something.
Look, I was just going to say, as a resident of public housing, that's fantastic that all of those people are being welcomed to our city, but I put in an application to the Department of Housing 5 years ago to get an air conditioner, and I still haven't got it. So it's great that the people from Emerald are able to come down, but it's really hot at my place. My mum's looking not great. So I'd put it to the Premier that, some of the locals probably need a bit of a hand as well. But I would like to commend the Lord Mayor. I think she has done a great job. And picking up on the Premier's point, I think some of the refuges they've set up, like the Kathleen Syme Community Centre and Hub, are fantastic in Carlton for us residents. And having the pools open a little bit later is also has been fantastic. But shame on you, Premier.
Mary, is what the Premier's offering, is
Well,
that going to be good enough? You just arrived, right?
well,
You
look,
just settled in.
We've got a few people are stressed and a few people are dying, okay? So now from our
dying?
group, that's
Why are
right.
they
They died on the way down because the car is hot. We don't have fancy cars up in the hills, so we come down, we don't have air conditioning. So now that, we have to call for the ambulance, and I bet the ambulance is pretty busy about this point on day 2. It's not even cool at night. The other thing, too, this is a question for Gary. Gary, on our way down the hill, down Wellington Road, we saw buses going up to the Dandenongs to go ride on Puffing Billy. So we were talking, earlier about, what do we do with the tourism thing? Because, it is a part of our industry up there, but, this is probably not a time to do that. So what do we know that's the buses?
I'll come to Gary in a minute, but let's just leave him so clear.
Well, my comment is I have a 3-year-old and she's in childcare all day, every day, because I'm working so hard to pay for my apartment. And what I'm interested to know is we talk about old people and people who are of disability or who have housing issues. What about children, and how are we going to help our children in our childcare centres for all those people who are working and travelling is what I'm interested in.
I'd like to, at this moment, thank all of our schools and our childcare providers for their assistance in managing our city in the heat wave. We have contributed through our community facility funding program money to many childcare facilities across the state to cope with the change of climate, and we've invested a lot of money in schools to design them so that they're cooler with ventilation, and the buildings are not as hot as they used to be, and a lot of those buildings are coming into play, and hopefully your child's childcare centre has been a recipient of one of these grants.
Well, I think actually the issue is that when everything gets too hot and the generators shut down, we're asked to keep the children at home, and so the issue doesn't really get resolved. And so, I'm interested in making sure that our plans address those issues, and so that we keep those institutions open for children who may not otherwise have air conditioning units.
We need childcare too, because we work in the city. Even though we're camped on the river, we need some childcare for our kids so that we can go to work, because we can't just not go to work. So maybe there's some other pop-up centres along the way.
Yeah, no. It's day 2. Everything's kind of under control still. It's okay, Martin Goodson.
I'm glad that everything's under control for you guys, but I'm working in a busy emergency department, and I can tell you things are almost never fully under control. So just to give you a feel for day 2 of the heat wave, we're expecting, while yesterday was busy and we were seeing perhaps 12 to 20% more patients than what we normally see in hospitals that are designed to sort of normally run at 100% capacity. Today's even busier than yesterday, because every day that you're exposed to heat from a health point of view, it's not just about how hot it is, it's about how long you're exposed to it. And this is yet another shocking day on the back of the day before. Fortunately, I'm very happy that about 15 years ago the government decided that it would start purchasing hotels next to every public hospital, with the idea that they run sort of for profit to offset the hospital commercially, but at the same time they could be used for discharging members of the public who didn't need health care but needed sort of air conditioning and social infrastructure. Because the problem was, in the early 2000s, every time they had a heat wave, the hospital would fill up with elderly people that you could make them well pretty quickly, but there was no safe place to send them to, because their house didn't have an air conditioner, and so they would sit round in an acute hospital bed. Back then it was about $500 a day costing the taxpayers. Now, it's probably $1,500 a day costing the taxpayers. Now we've got a more appropriate temporary piece of accommodation until this heat wave breaks, to shift people out of public hospitals as a discharge destination. So that's working well for us.
Sounds like a really great investment. That's good. Cool. Okay, so we're kind of under control, right? Okay, now it's day 3. Day 3, maximum 43. Day 3, 43 degrees after an overnight low of 27. Another stinking hot night, followed by a stinking hot day. And what happens, Terry Jones, SP AusNet, after a few days? Tell us what happens after a few days of super hot temperatures.
Yeah, so our job in the network is to keep supplies on for lights and, more importantly, air conditioners. So by day 3, we've got our integrated plans for bushfire and heatwave responses well in place and well working. We have members sitting in the Emergency Council Response Organisation, and we review at least twice a day what we've done in the day and what we're going to do the next day. So day 3, things are warming up. Our big problem is heat in the cables, in the assets, the transformers, and when they start to get warm, we start to have problems. So the key response to that we have is demand management. So we've already issued 3 critical peak price days, which encourages commercial and industrial customers to reduce demand, which allows the cables to run cooler. We've probably got about 50 to 100 megawatts of demand reduction from the CPD calls, and we also have on standby another 50 to 100 megawatts of demand management on one-on-one calls, so we can actually target where we achieve the demand reduction. And that could be a building, that could be a chocolate factory, wherever in the network that we find things are getting hot on our assets, we can actually target further peak demand. So day 3, we're still cruising, everything's a bit warm, but no problems.
Yeah, unfortunately it's not true, and I'll just, as I tell you that, I'll do this.
Sorry.
There you go. Okay. That's not true because actually you start shedding load on day 3. You thought it was okay. When you got up this morning, it was a bright sunny day, right? You got air conditioning so you didn't care, you woke up, you were eating your cornflakes out on the balcony, birds were chirping, then you got the call saying, we are routed.
Yes.
We're going to have to start shedding load right now. What does shedding load actually mean?
Yes, well, that could probably be caused by a failure of an asset, for example, or a cable with an unforeseen fault on it that goes out of service.
Brilliant, that's what happened.
So in those circumstances, first option is switching around the problem. So we have our automated distribution feeder response where automatically within a certain number of minutes the feeder will find another route for the electricity around the network, and typically in a city like this it's a highly interconnected network with many routes into one location. So that's the first response. Next response is we've already stopped planned maintenance. We don't do any work on the system. So we have crews ready to do repairs. Nobody's working on the system at all. We've got crews ready, emergency response. They go in, isolate the problem, and start to fix it. Third level of response, if we're into emergency type supplies, hospitals, police stations, public services, they already have their own generation in many cases. So they can start up their own generation and run probably for 3 or 4 hours. We ourselves have our own generation on 20-foot trailers that we can mobilise and put into a problem area. So third day, everything's cool. If we have a bad event or an asset failure, we can still respond and keep the lights on. Whether we can keep the air conditioning on is a matter of how much demand is created by that air conditioning.
Okay, so wouldn't you know it, everything goes wrong. You are shedding load now. Right. How does shedding load actually work? Stop, obfuscating. Tell us about shedding load. How does it work?
Shedding load would go along a pre-programmed rolling cycle across different feeders within the city. It would deal with non-essential loads first, and we have all those scheduled. We would not touch essential loads. So probably a building would go out for a day, another building would go out for the next day. So it would be part of our emergency response planning that we have this scheduled running load reduction.
Okay, useful. Okay, so luckily, Martin, you work at Royal Melbourne, one of those essential services that is not affected by a rolling thing. Do you want to just tell us about how secure you feel with your power?
I want to make it real what load shedding means. If you get residential load shedding, what that means is that you can't run your air conditioner. And we know that we know an air conditioner reduces the likelihood that you'll die from heat-related illness by 70%. And so when they've done population studies where they've talked about load shedding and the health impact, we expect to see a 50% increase in the number of people who die in a community if load shedding occurs for residential properties. So load shedding means people will die, and that's a balance that you make about a small group of people in an isolated geographic area being exposed to that increased risk versus the whole state falling over. So that's the reality. The second reality is that, you know, my hospital is not an island. My hospital relies on all of the same infrastructure that the rest of the community does. Now, sure, we have some very special, wires that run into our place that are a little bit isolated from others. But certainly, you know, it's my experience that I'm aware of multiple hospitals in metropolitan Melbourne that have had to evacuate because not only has their normal electrical infrastructure off the grid failed, but concurrently their internal hospital backup generation has failed. And that's happened, you know, in the 2000s in at least 2 hospitals that I'm aware of. And I'm also aware that even brand new hospitals that are recently built, sometimes their internal power infrastructure surprisingly is not tested until these big days, and it can fall over as well.
So now it's getting scary, right? That's that's pretty bad. You know, losing power in a building. Losing power in a hospital is a very scary time. But this is a peak load issue, isn't it, Ariel? So, you know, we talked a little bit before about the peri-urban area and how Mary can't use PVs because she's got too many trees. How pervasive is off-grid action here in Melbourne? Are a lot of people off-grid, or are they partially off-grid, or how does it work?
Well, the majority will still be on the grid, but having their own capability as well, both solar and batteries. So they're able to support themselves for a certain amount of time with their stored energy in the battery or their electric vehicles. There's certainly quite a few of those around. They're plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Started selling back in 2014, and so they can reverse those and discharge into the house. That was even done back in 2012 during the Hurricane Sandy event in New York, and on top of that, that taught people that they need to invest in distributed infrastructure, and they started doing that in New York then, and we're doing that now.
In Hurricane Sandy, everybody just had a generator in their basement. That's what they did, you know, and the queues were for getting petrol to put into your thing. Okay, that's good. Rightio. So let's just talk about, somebody mentioned before, actually Mary, you mentioned before about the idea of fires breaking out in the catchment area of the Cardinia Reservoir. Tell us, Tony Murphy, Fire, what's your title? Hang on, what are you? You're Deputy Fire Commissioner. Tell us about the risk to drinking water supplies from fires in catchment areas for reservoirs.
Well, there's definitely a consideration to, you know, ensuring the risk and consequence that goes with any fire, you know, in the catchment or beyond the catchment, where you've got rivers, you know, like such as the big rivers around the Hume area, which feeds, our supply chain to reservoirs. But because we've been very effective and very efficient with our planned burns programs, they've been very much based around risk and also community protection. We've reduced the risk significantly. We've also got technology that will immediately identify through satellite and also through other infrared technology where we've got fire in the landscape and make sure that we're immediately on there with a very, very rapid attack.
So we're pretty confident that that's not going to be a problem.
Won't be a problem.
Perfect. So peri-urban, no problemo. Unfortunately, we've got 2 big fires break out in Melbourne. One in a high-rise in Carlton, just near you actually, Dan, and one in that has a whole range of ethnicities in that building, and one in a university student accommodation in Swanston Street. Luckily, that's not too full with university students because it's only January. They don't show up until around about March or April. So, but there are a lot of short courses going on. So there's a whole bunch of RMIT people attending, living in that building. So how do you cope with that particular challenge?
It is a challenge, undoubtedly, because it's one of the worst nightmares in having that particular situation unfold. It's just more than a coincidence that there's two of them. In a high-rise building fire, you'd find that Melbourne City Council, being the very future-focused council that it is, all of the buildings would have been properly fire protected, so they would have been fitted with sprinklers and so forth. So that would have at least held the fires in check. The fire services would be looking, and also all of the emergency services would be looking for assistance from a whole raft of organisations in ensuring that we provide relief and relief efforts, and also, you know, those people that needed hospitalisation would also receive it. The added dimension or complexity is, you know, having overseas students and so forth, so it starts to have a federal perspective to it in, you know, like in regards to the Department of Foreign Affairs, to ensure that there's notifications occurring. You'd be looking very much at establishing triage area. There would be an added complexity about people working in that particular heat wave. So, yeah, there's a variety of complexities.
So, challenging, but the sort of challenge you're up for, right? You've planned for that. You've planned for that for the last 20 years, so you're okay.
Exactly. Easy. Yep.
Yeah, easy peasy. Yeah. Okay, so, Dean, now things are getting pretty crappy. You talked about your AC. You don't even have an AC, right? So you have to go and stay with some of your neighbours to do that. So people are out on the streets the whole time. It's 27 minimum overnight, right? It's a hot day in the middle of the night. So people are getting pretty grumpy and crabby now. So street violence is starting to break out. Problems with drug use on the streets. It's not really a safe place to be. Tell us how you cope with that.
Well, what we do, depending on early in the evening, if it's, you know, we've got no air conditioner and the place is unbearably hot. If the power's still on at Northland, we'll go to the movies. So we'll spend time there out of the house and go and see the Lego Movie 3 that's coming out at that time.
Jeez, it's pretty slow.
Yeah.
11 years.
And then we would gather together a few families, and with no power, we'd just head to the beach and just spend the night at the beach and actually make a night of it. Like, we'd actually, you know, rely on our own resources, try and find some food and make a bit of a night of it, take mum with us and actually just
and
make
safety in numbers kind of thing.
Yeah, and just go to the beach and actually try and have a sort of turn the adversity into something where we can actually build the community.
What about you, Joel?
Well, I'm hearing and seeing just utter chaos. There are fires breaking out. There are people coming from the country sleeping in the city, an influx of 10,000 people. There are elderly people being left alone. Like you said, 27 degrees at night because of the residual heat is a killer. I'm hearing power going off, no aircon. I'm hearing water shortage, and the emergency rooms are filling up. I just hear chaos. And being homeless, and being in the homeless community, I know that there's 22,000 people homeless in Victoria on any given night. And 1,000 of those, over 1,000, sleep rough, so they're sleeping on the streets. Being homeless also includes people sleeping outside or in impoverished dwellings, sleeping temporarily with friends or relatives, staying in boarding houses, staying in government-funded crisis or temporary accommodation, and living in severely crowded dwellings. Now, people living in those sort of conditions, we're the local community. We're a big part of the local community, 22,000 people in Victoria, just Victoria. So it's chaos. We are losing it.
Are you scared?
We're scared. We don't know what to do. There's a lot of kids as well that are homeless with their mums and with their families. What do we do? What do we do?
Okay, Premier, here we go. Here's a chance. Lead, come on. 10 seconds.
10 seconds. We understand that the situation is getting worse, and we have called on our interstate counterparts and international as well, when we thank the New Zealand Police Service for coming over and helping with the increased needs that we are seeing at this time. But we would like to remind the community of the cool spaces and the community facilities that have been established as hubs for the respite from the cool.
Okay, so we've got those cool zones that we were talking about with Ian before. Yeah, really good. So people need to remember that they can go there And there's not only cool zones, but there's also people, there's eyes on the street, there are people around, it's a safe place to be. Okay, Martin, you want to say something?
I would just like to say that society gets a bum rap during disasters and crises in terms of how we cope. In fact, like you read the newspapers and stuff, and everyone says, there's panic on the street and everyone's murdering everyone and rolling everyone for everyone's pension check. Just doesn't happen. It's media legend that's promulgated because it gets front page news. Most of the time, most communities in any time in history actually act resiliently in the vast majority of times. So my recommendation to my patients that flow through my front door is stop reading the newspaper and don't listen to sensationalist stuff. The other thing just about the homeless people, they're a good example of the people that in the early 2000s we really struggled to find appropriate place to house them during their intercurrent stressor, which in this case is a heat wave. Certainly back then, accommodation options, crisis accommodation, overflowing, ridiculously over capacity, and these people would either take up, literally in camp in our waiting room, or alternatively be taking up a acute care hospital bed, which is a precious commodity back then and still I expect now.
Yeah, okay. So, Claire, here we go. I haven't spoken to you for a while. You're up in Sydney, right? On business. You do that quite often. Your son, how old?
My daughter.
Daughter, sorry, how old?
3.
3. Febrile convulsions, right? 5 o'clock. Husband panics, races off to the hospital. You get home, what time do you land? 8:30?
Well, I probably haven't landed because the flight might have been cancelled or delayed.
No, flights are okay. Airports are everything's okay.
Good infrastructure
upgrade. But you
upgrade.
get there, but when you get home, power's off.
Are they there?
No, they're at the hospital.
Well, I probably wouldn't have been able to get inside because if there's no power, I've got no lift and I'm not walking up 20 floors to get
Correct.
home.
So you put your bag in, your car's in the basement. You've got 2 cars, too many. But you've got 2 cars, you put your stuff in the car, you just go out onto Docklands Boulevard. How do you spend your next 12 hours?
Well, I'm going to the hospital.
Straight there, right?
Yep.
Okay. What's happening in the hospital? Can they even get to see someone?
Yeah. So the short answer is hospitals generally run close to capacity on a good day, and so on a bad day they run over capacity, which means that they become less efficient. So when we're several days into a heat wave, we'd expect 20% more than average presentation, particularly with the ageing population. You'll see someone, but you'll vie with the fact that 3 times the number of people who arrive deceased to the emergency department to be attended to by doctors than on a normal day. If you want to come to an emergency department via an ambulance, they'll have 50% more cases that they'll need to attend, so your wait time will be longer. If you go, maybe I can survive without going to an emergency department and calling an ambulance, maybe I'll just get my GP to pop over and do a house call. Well, we know that their workload increases by more than 4-fold. I don't even know how you run a business that's workload increases 4-fold on a particular day. It's impossible. Yeah. So you're going to struggle to access timely health care. Hopefully we have triage systems in place where we can sort through the most acute people.
Yep. So you 3 spend the evening waiting for some. Well, having had the triage, then you're there, right? That's it. Brilliant. Okay, that's the end of this day. So things are starting to get a little bit, tougher, right? On to day 4 now. Okay, another really hot, stinking night. 25.6 degrees overnight. 43.5 degrees maximum on day 4. Really tough. So, Premier, I open up with you again. I'm sorry. You get paid the big bucks. So, public transport, we haven't talked about that much yet. It's getting more erratic now. Trains are running on a reduced schedule. Of course they are, because, for a bunch of them, their AC doesn't work anymore. Power lines are starting to sag a little bit, and so on and so forth. There's no rail buckling, of course, because we dealt with that 10 years ago after we had those pictures of people watering the railway tracks in the middle of a heat wave. Pretty scary thought. Anyway, so that's pretty bad. So things are, we're running about 75%. But then disaster strikes. A transmission station in South Morang explodes. at 2 p.m. and power to the city loop is lost. Trains and passengers on the trains are marooned in the middle of the city loop. There is no evening rail service. There's no rail service for the rest of the day. Buses are put in. As well as the rail problems, that extensive amount of heat, and some roads are affected by continuous heat, and the top surface of the road just gets rolled up on the wheels. So that's happening all the way across Melbourne. You're having to close roads now, so now there are traffic jams everywhere. Over to you.
I'd firstly like to thank the emergency services for getting the people out of the loop, and thankfully no one was hurt. And I acknowledge the difficulties, and I'd like to also thank the passengers for assisting their neighbours getting up through that system. And of course, we have implemented many things to make our transport network a lot better, but it is under stress right now, and we will get through today. And this evening we asked where there is space available in our hotels, where there is space in the community facilities, where individuals can help their friends or relatives as they are stuck in the city this evening. We ask that they do what they can. Tomorrow, I would ask that all employers enact their heatwave response plan, which means that a lot of their employees will need to work from home if possible, or from one of these community hubs with a lot of cooling if they can't work at home due to the heat. But we will need to make sure that the roads are clear, not only for replacement buses for priority transport, but also for the roads for our emergency services and our emergency vehicles. So we will be implementing a ban on cars, except for emergency services and obviously for priority needs.
So you're establishing some clear arterial roads that are available for critical movement. Okay, that's really good. So turning to you, Gary Sticklin, who's General Manager of the Alto on Burke, so a hotelier in the city. You've been curiously silent so far, but anyway. So we know that heat waves have a big impact on the operations of city businesses. You know, we talked about 37 million City of Melbourne worked out. But for you guys, it's probably this is a bit of a boon, isn't it? You've got people coming in, you've got peri-urban people coming out the wazoo trying to find somewhere to stay. You haven't got any money. You just want to stay somewhere cool, right?
We just want the bushfire rate. That's the rate we want, the bushfire rate.
Yeah, bushfire rate. Okay, so how can you help?
I was feeling pretty comfortable on days 1, 2 and 3, but I'm starting to get a bit worried now. And so all my great plans have sort of gone out the window to a degree, but a couple of things have happened just to set the scene for the tourism and hospitality industry. We've got a little bit smarter. A number of facilities, or particularly hotels, have rooftop gardens which are somewhat self-sufficient, so we're able to grow some of our own food, particularly vegetables. Put in aquaculture systems whereby you can actually farm our own fish. So we have our food supply somewhat under control to an extent. And maybe not quite the right idea, but maybe some rooftop pens for chickens as well. So we might be able to do that, but we'll talk about that with free range versus not battery, but at least cage style. We've also, because we've had a planning minister that's been hell-bent on building apartments, fortunately now 75% of our employees live within the city because there's so much.
I was going to ask you about that, because if they need the train, they can't get there, right?
Train, yeah. So what I would probably be doing from my point of view is, after riding my bicycle into town because of the great infrastructure from Melbourne City Council, along the Yarra, which is not hopefully too heat affected, would be contacting all those people we can to first of all get into the hotel. So there's some good things that are happening from a tourism point of view. Probably the other thing that'd be difficult, though, would be at that time of year is one of our busiest times. It's where our international visitors are probably in their greatest numbers coming into the city, particularly talking about the Australian Open tennis period in January. The Grand Prix's moved on, but our major events department has been particularly good, and they've actually got the Tour de France to come to Melbourne instead. So, we could have some significant events happening in the city at the same time. So the capacity of hotels might be quite restricted. So we want to be good community citizens. We're going to have a 6-day Earth Hour event, but SB AusNet has made sure that, or not sure, but not without them trying to do it. We don't really have supply to really worry about that much. So we've got a few challenges going on. What we would do, though, there is, within the CBD of Melbourne, there's certainly a restriction on supply of accommodation, but in the inner suburban areas, a number of motels that generally aren't as highly occupied. So we'd be calling on those members to do what they can to assist.
So you have an association?
Yes, through the Australian Hotels, or now the TAA, and also the Australian Accommodation Association. We would call on those members to assist wherever possible. There's a number of things that we could do. On any given day, 20% of hotel rooms in Melbourne are probably vacant, so there's capacity there to take up some of those areas. Maybe it's assisting with housing from a hospital point of view, so there is that not outsourcing, but outpatient type care. We have events and function rooms that are potentially being cooled, so a space like this that is probably being cooled through a central cooling system already in place, assuming we've got enough power to do that. It can house people, accommodate people temporarily, possibly some of our homeless community, and other people who've come in from regional areas as well. So there's a few things we could do.
So Joel and Mary, would you take up that offer? Would you go and spend a couple of hours chilling out at the Alto on Burke?
We might do a little bit of timeshare there and kind of swap it around to get through the whole community, because by now we've been here long enough that we've set up a little camp. We've got our solar panels up, we got our own power, we got a little part-time creche, we got a community cafe, we got a little veggie garden going too. We've actually taken to having to bury some of the people that have died because the ambulance can't come. We couldn't quite make it to the hospital. We'd like to have a nice visit from you, maybe come around our camp. But, we are resilient, and we're getting on with it.
Do you need to have showers? Or are you swimming in the
We
Yarra?
have solar showers.
Solar showers,
right? It's a
okay.
black plastic, that bag you hang up with a little hose.
Perfect.
We've set the camp up. It's like MASH.
Very good. What about you, Joel? Would you take up his opportunity, his offer?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really good idea. And I think we need more things like that. So even if homeless services had connections to real estate agents where homeless people could go to a first point of contact, and they have a relationship with real estate agents and get us in the suburbs and in hotel rooms and motels, because we might not necessarily know how to or what's available. So I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, okay. So it's the issue of how you actually tell people this is happening, right?
Well, getting communication out is one thing, and I think businesses are very good at taking from the community in the way of taking their money. And it's a time of crises that we probably need to see what we can do to put back. There's no immediate return. It's part of being part of a community and doing what you can to assist. It's not going to be the whole solution.
A bit of it. Okay, so that's great. Unfortunately, 9 o'clock your power goes off. So it goes off from 9 till 2. You can promise them it will come back on at 2. What do you do now?
In our case,
apart from panic.
Apart from that, yeah. No, apart from, I survived it was the 1994 gas crisis, survived through that, not the same sort of extent, but that was quite challenging. There's certainly one way to upset hotel guests, and that's to give them cold showers, but at this stage we're struggling to give them a shower at all. So I guess from that point of view, we'd be ensuring that our guests are informed about what's going on, that they're able to move around the hotel. Obviously, lifts being out of action, so similar issues to what you have in high-rise residential accommodation as well. So trying to manage those sort of things would certainly be a significant challenge. We're a fairly low-rise building, so a lot of that is taken away, but in high-rise hotels, which many are, that's a significant issue, just moving people around.
Yeah, okay. So Dino, just before we leave this day, I just want to check back in with you. Now the cool zone up around Exhibition Gardens is, everybody knows about that now, and it's fully developed. All the services the Premier talked about are there, so it's a safe zone. There's people around. It's a pretty cool sort of place. Tell us what it's like.
Pretty chaotic. There's a lot of people there. I've seen through Twitter that it's just chaos. There's lots of people, huge queues for food and water and shelter, and the demand is huge. So good on them, good on the state government for putting that on, but it's overwhelmed with people. So we've decided to go to my brother's place in West Heidelberg when Mum's not travelling so well. So we're going to my wife's going to drive there with the kids, and I'm going to go home and get some clothes, and we're going to walk from the beach. I'm going to walk from the beach where we spent the night. So because of the urban forest canopy, we can pretty much walk totally covered by urban forest from St Kilda to Carlton.
And up Elizabeth Street, you can take your shoes off and walk along the creek.
Exactly. It's fantastic.
I like that. That's
So,
good.
yeah.
Okay, that's good. Okay, that's the end of day 4. So things are still going okay. Day 5, maximum 26 overnight, still stinking bloody hot. 44 degrees, maximum day 5. Pretty bad. Okay, Gary, 20 Korean guests arrive, and you say to them, you know what, the Puffing Billy's not running. I'm sorry, I don't care what those buses were doing heading up to the Dandenongs. There is no Puffing Billy. What do you do with these suckers? They don't speak English. They've got a tour guide who's completely frazzled. You've already got these peri-urbanites, camping in your office. Blah, blah, blah. What do you do?
Well, actually, one good thing, we would have some skilled staff with language, so language wouldn't be a major issue for us, and that's another area we could help in the community into residential apartments. We'll have a lot more multilingual staffing around. What do we do with them for the time? Yeah, well, certainly. Well, there's a couple of issues there, because one is that there is potentially an obligation if they, from a contractual point of view, if they have an itinerary that says they're going to do A, B and C, and in theory, from a legality, we are required to provide that service as a tourism industry. There are some exceptions we could probably get around that, so that's one thing to think about. What are we going to do? We're probably going to shuffle off maybe to change it around. We'll have a cultural exhibition and perhaps move them off to the National Gallery, perhaps down to Ian Potter Centre down here as well. Try and keep them in indoors areas where they're going to be a little less exposed to direct sunlight and that sort of area. Mainly keep them hydrated and make sure they've got that information about the hydration would be the key message we want to get across.
Yes, there's a small number of key messages to give to them through their interpreter, and that's the important thing for you to do. Okay, fair enough. So, Dino, you've walked back from the beach. It's taken you all night to get home. You get there, the power's off.
Yep.
One of your neighbours on the 15th floor, elderly lady like your mother, good friend of your mother actually, she hasn't got anybody, so she's by herself. There's no power on the thing. She can't walk, she's got arthritis. So what do you do?
Well, I'd pop up and visit her, and from there, given she looked in a lot of need, I think get some of the supplies from our place, some of the tin goods that we could probably give her to have a meal, and then probably call an ambulance and see if we could get some hydration into her.
Is an ambulance going to come? You can say yes, that's okay.
So look, there is some redundancy in the system. There are emergency ambulances and there are non-emergency ambulances, and there are a number of private companies, and that's probably even more common in 2025. So it's likely that the state will have shelled out some of these transport responsibilities even further to the private sector. So someone will come at some time, but how many hours you have to wait in a really hot room?
Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah, okay.
I was just going to say the good thing about our apartment block, and I'm not sure what it's like in Docklands, but because we've all lived there for a long time, we all know each other, so we can quickly sort of get up there and visit Mavis, spend an hour on, hour off, 24 hours. So, for those families that have stayed in the building, we can actually hang around and give her a hand and keep her hydrated and have a chat to her.
Okay. Joel, your baby's getting a bit unwell now. Heat affected. What do you do? Take her to the emergency room?
I think I would have to.
Got no choice,
Day or
have you,
night?
really? Oh, it's day.
It's day?
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely have to take her to the emergency room. But like you said, I'm not sure how long we're going to have to wait, but it's our only option.
And you're going to have to walk, right? There's no way of getting
Yeah,
there.
we're going to have to walk. If there's a bus, we might have to catch a bus.
Trams might be running.
Trams, public transport.
Yep.
Definitely.
Okay, so that's you. So you want to say something, Terry?
Just to let you know, at the end of day 4, we fixed the cable fault, so supplies are back on.
Good.
If it's a transformer failure,
Yep.
that'll be in the morning, day 5.
Right.
We've either taken extra load off or we put our mobile gensets on. So day 4, if it's a cable fault, we're back on. Day 5 in the morning, if it's a transformer full, we're back on.
So how big are these mobile generators, just as a matter of interest?
20-foot container.
Okay, so they're big suckers, right? Okay. Useful to know. Pleased you're on the case there, that's good. Okay, Martin, so you've had no sleep for what? 5 days now at least, and your other 16 specialists as well, plus all the thingos. And the interns, we didn't actually say at the start that the January is one of the intake times, so that's when all the new doctors pull stitches out the wrong way and that kind of stuff. Just useful to know. Anyway, so you haven't slept for 5 days. It's relentless, right?
Sure.
The poor old Ambos, same thing. They haven't slept for 5 days, so they've got to be out in the sun. So how's it going with you? How's it travelling?
Well,
can you get help? Is there anyone who can help? Can you get some...
The short answer is no.
Right.
So the hospitals probably by this stage, we'd expect that we'd well and truly exceeded our maximum capacity as far as beds are concerned, which will mean that people will be sleeping in the emergency department waiting for a bed for more than 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
The hospital will have stopped all of its elective operations. There are some beds that it can staff, but staffing beds is often contingent on nursing staff coming to work. And if the nursing staff can't drive on the roads or catch the public transport or are busy defending their house from a bushfire, then it makes things a bit difficult. We just have to battle on with the fixed resources that we have.
Yeah, okay. Do your best. Okay. Claire, you're back from the emergency room. That febrile convulsion's been sorted. You're back in your apartment block, but some of the elderly Chinese residents at the top of your block, nobody's heard from them for a few days. You've got a phone tree in place, so people are in contact with each other, but these guys somehow aren't part of that phone tree. So how strong is your community? What do you do about that?
Well, I'm probably not at work that day, and so I'm going to go and corral a few of my mates that I do know in the building, and we'll probably go do a bit of door knocking. It'd be great to find an interpreter, so we might come over to see you and see if you can give us a few people for a few hours, and then we'll just go and door knock, because we're not going to leave them there and we're not going to ignore the issue. So, but we will need help in communicating with those people.
Will you still be working? Will you still be off at work, flying up to Sydney or...?
Oh, yeah, no, probably not. No, I'm probably at home and might do a bit from home. But.
Yeah, okay. So that's the end of day 5, I think. Should we move on to day 6 now? People are getting pretty tired now. Day 6. This is the last day forecast for the thing. 21.5, quite a cool night overnight, but then back up again to 41.8 for the last day of the thing. So, Mary, you've got social media going, all sorts of really nice community getting going. There's a risk, of course, that you're never going to move out. The Premier has to confront that possibility.
Well, we've now become part of Melbourne.
There you are. You're now a resident. That's right.
We are Melbourne. And if we lose our houses in a bushfire, we become part of the homeless.
Yeah. So what about people who aren't social network people? What about people that are elderly members? I mean, a lot of people living up in the peri-urban area are going to be,
absolutely. But in our experience with the social media, that they always know somebody who's got the social media,
right?
And that's the way it works. That we get that information out, so that if we use our phone, that somebody else who doesn't understand the phone or understand how to work it, or doesn't have an iPhone, because that's, of course, by then it'll be the I don't know what kind of phone. We'll be just thinking it. It'll just be happening. But you always know somebody who's got it. And that's the way it works in the hills.
So it's about having a tight-knit community.
That's right. It's all about communication in the end. And person-to-person communication, ultimately.
Yeah. So you guys are pretty settled, right?
We're part of Melbourne now.
Sweet. You just got to get used to it. Okay, Martin. Last disaster for you. But it is a big disaster, this one. A large retirement home has lost power at midday. I know you fixed it, but I don't know. Bam, it went again. And the residents are in mortal danger. So the hospital takes the unprecedented step, and perhaps illegal, I don't know, of sending you and a team out there to provide on-the-spot assistance to them. You haven't slept for a week. The emergency's bulging at the seams. What do you do? How do you respond to that?
So you might be surprised to know, but we've been doing that since the early 2000s, because nursing homes...
surprised to know that.
Nursing homes haven't been coping for some time now. So we've got actually a crack team of doctors and nurses that routinely visit nursing homes to assist them with managing their sicker patients in situ. So I'm expecting by 2025 that everyone has had a sensible discussion about how their medical care would like to be administered in the last years of their life. And back in the early 2000s, we knew that sort of 80% of one's total lifetime healthcare expenditure was spent in the last year of their life. But it's now 2025 and people are going, this is a bit unusual and a bit inappropriate, and there's a more measured approach to managing patients in the community with less people being transported by nursing homes. But your scenario does flip our understanding of who's at risk, because studies have previously shown that when you live in supported care, you're actually protected during a heat wave. A nursing home is or a retirement village is a great place to be because you're a community, you've got people overseeing you, and you've got good air conditioning and health infrastructure. It's the people living alone who are elderly who are at the greatest risk. But now we've got a whole cluster of people who are overheating, and they probably need to be evacuated. And how do you evacuate a nursing home? You get a bus company to go and pick them up, and you round them all up onto a bus and you take them to a community area that's got air conditioning in it. And then you get community services like St John or the Red Cross to provide basic, simple medical care in the makeshift environment.
So basically you're saying you say no. I'm staying here at the emergency.
No. We'd send someone out. We'd send some people out to coordinate
that response.
And try and continue to manage these people in an alternative community environment.
See, I thought that was a disaster for you, but it's just what you do, right? So, Premier, back to you to close. Okay, it's coming to the end of day 6 now. Cool change sweeping across the city. We all throw our doors open, breathe that cool air. Thank God for that. Tomorrow is Australia Day holiday. Today's a Sunday. Tomorrow is a holiday on Monday, and bizarrely, we're going to have fireworks. Maybe we are. It's called change, right? It's not hot anymore. No problem. And you, luckily, have the bully pulpit. You're giving a keynote speech to open the fireworks on the Yarra in front of our 10,000 new residents and everybody else who shows up. What do you say? What do you reflect about the last 6 days? What do you think about how we could do better or whatever? There you go.
Well, given it is Australia Day tomorrow, it is appropriate that we acknowledge the tireless efforts of everyone across the community, our emergency service providers, our hospitals, our local government, our community, for working together through this incredibly trying time. Australia Day is a great opportunity to reflect on that. And with respect to the fireworks, given that we have, despite the best efforts, we have lost too many Victorians once again during this heat wave. As a mark of respect, we won't be having fireworks this Australia Day, but we will be using the time to gather our energy to work towards rebuilding our businesses and getting our lives back on track in the next few days. But I would like to acknowledge once again the efforts of the community and of our services, and we will be reviewing our heat wave responses and our heat wave action plans and our resilience plans in the coming days, and looking forward to investing a lot more in climate adaptation as we move forward.
Thanks, Premier. Okay, so there you have it. That was our take on what 6 days of a heatwave might look like. I hope you found it kind of interesting and stimulating to think what it actually might be like, what it might be like for you in a heatwave. How would you react in that situation? How would you deal with some of those challenges that we talked about? And we just talked about a few. We just made up a scenario based on the weather forecast. But you could think about all sorts of things like in the same sort of way, how they might, challenges that you might face and how you might respond to them. Okay, so to finish now, we want to have some reflections, 3 reflections. One from, well, first off, Michael Nolan, Director of Sustainability and Climate Change from AECOM.
Just as a straight-up reflection, a lot of the cities around the world are looking at resilience in terms of how they respond to make sure their communities and their overall governance systems can respond to these sorts of events. But I'd particularly like to point out what came out of Gary in terms of the private sector response. some of the work that we've been doing for the United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Reduction has been about bringing private sector together with government to consider how can we invest in resilience and increase that sort of activity. And I think it just some of those things coming to light that government can't do this by themselves. Community have a strong role to play, but also the private sector should stand up and see what things they can contribute during these tough times and prepare for that, rather than have to try and do it ab lib at the time. So, thank you.
Very good, thank you. Brian Alippa, is she around? You're not Brian Alippa, but you look similar. From the Rockefeller Foundation, right?
Rockefeller Foundation.
Okay, you should explain. We haven't talked about why you're here.
Hi everyone, as you can tell, I'm not Brian Alippa. My name is Aaron Spencer, and I'm with 100 Resilient Cities, empowered by the Rockefeller Foundation. We are here this week working with the City of Melbourne. The City of Melbourne was recently selected as one of our 33 inaugural cities in 100 Resilient Cities. The Rockefeller Foundation has made a $100 million commitment to urban resilience over the next 3 years, and Melbourne was selected as one of the inaugural cities, and we are working with the City of Melbourne closely on this initiative. And I have a brief 3-minute video which I'm going to show you that sort of encapsulates the program and some of the cities with which we're working. So I'll turn it over to whoever's operating the video. Thank you.
We all have common threats.
You have 100 cities that will be learning from each other, and this network is something unique.
I'm so much interested to learn more about the 100RC program, and so much willing to see if we can be part of that network.
Today is just a toe in the water, an opening workshop in some ways, the calisthenics before we actually play the game.
Three months ago, the first 33 cities were named. Since then, we've been working with points of contact in each city to begin to implement the 100 Resilient Cities program.
We live in a physically vulnerable place. More tough things are coming our way. We're not the only ones that are vulnerable, and it seems that cities across the world are.
Byblos, it's the oldest inhabited city in the world. Nevertheless, after 6,000 or 8,000 years, it has shocks and stresses that hinder or that threaten the city.
Uma cidade como Porto Alegre, ela já tem um nível de qualidade de vida bastante alto, mas temos problemas ainda sérios para enfrentar.
All the things that you need to be resilient. Power is basic, telephone is basic, water is basic. There's some other things that need to be basic. Broadband, chief resilience officer, legislation that supports the sharing of information. Those things need to be basic.
The whole idea of resilience is if you spend more money on the front end, being smart, you'll spend much less money on the back end and you'll save a lot of lives. So why wait?
We wanted to do a broad stakeholder meeting to introduce the concept of resilience, to work with stakeholders to identify challenges, opportunities, risks, and really lay out what the agenda for the resilience building effort might be.
But the critical moments to us are when the city really recognizes that it has a variety of different stresses that they need to focus on as well. These slow burning issues that exist despite a shock.
One of the things we've learned already is that we are very focused on a disaster or a major event. What this process is really teaching us is there are commonalities of how to strengthen our society and our communities that will benefit us in any kind of event.
So this is what we mean by resilience overall. New York in the 1970s, only people who had a lot of wealth were doing well. There was a blackout in the city. Chaos ensued.
And in 2003, you'll remember, there was another big blackout in New York. I was actually the person in command of the Emergency Operations Center the night of 2003. I would love to take credit that it was just about the emergency response. The real reason there wasn't rioting is because New York became much more robust and diverse and accepting of change and integrated and inclusive.
As Lebanese, we have become accustomed to shocks and stresses. That's why sometimes we do not take into consideration the impact. We say, okay, it can happen. So what? I'm used to. But it can have disastrous effects.
If you add up the total cost of disasters globally, $403 billion worth of economic production was wiped off the face of the earth. Who's paying for $277 billion worth of economic loss? And the answer, well, is you.
How do you motivate people to action? If you can put a price tag on that risk, I think that helps people make decisions a little more fluently.
We're going to help those cities start the strategy process, really helping them get organized around what are the needs and the priorities and the projects to support those priorities in each city.
O projeto Cidades Resilientes da Fundação Rockefeller permite trocas de experiências, de melhores práticas, de tal maneira que nós possamos aprender com as outras cidades do mundo.
You ask anybody from Byblos, they can tell you everything about Byblos. But I want, after 2 years, if you ask them about resilience, it's also part of their development plan.
After the workshop, the cities are being asked to hire a chief resilience officer. And it has to be someone who can cut across silos, someone who can convene different types of people and bring them to a strategy.
The hope is that once this platform's together and these cities have developed their resilience plans, that they will be able to access the full menu of resilience options.
One of the things that's exciting about doing these workshops back to back is our ability to recognize patterns both in the challenges that these cities face, but also in the solutions. And that's really going to be the promise, being able to distribute common solutions to many of our cities and doing it more efficiently and at scale.
When you're the mayor of a city, and you really don't have time for philosophy, you have to figure out what works. The thing that always works is partnerships.
They recognize the need to partner with us rather than view us as traditional grant makers and collaborate so that they can achieve their unique vision of resilience for their city.
People do amazing things. If they can do it when things are tough, we can certainly do it when things are not tough, if we would just take the time to prepare.
Just a brief overview of this. Thank you guys very much. We're very excited to be working with the city of Medellin. My name's Aaron Spencer. I'm a relationships manager. I manage relationships with Christchurch and Melbourne and all of our cities in Latin America. I'll be available after if anyone has any questions, and we're excited to get on this journey with all of you. Thank you.
Real, thanks. So the Premier's been demoted now, so she's thrown out of office. Here she is.
I believe I'm now playing the role of councillor. You know, the City of Melbourne is obviously proud to host the event that we just did tonight. One of the key parts of our climate adaptation strategy is about community engagement and awareness and raising these issues that have been raised tonight. And so thank you to all of the panel for being involved and providing your insights of what the future may or may not look like in not that long a time, in 11 years. The City of Melbourne is involved or has instigated some many award-winning strategies and plans that are going to help the city deal with climate change and the effects of extreme weather. And Dean Griggs and Ian Shears have already gone through a few of the responses that we'll be looking at in community and also in the ecology of the city through the forest and our water sensitive urban design and programs like that. There's lots of information on our website, so go to the City of Melbourne if you're interested in what we are doing and how we plan to actually manage the change of climate in the future. Tonight has been a collaboration. I'd like to thank obviously Mara from Green Cross for working with the city on this, and Andrew for hosting tonight's Hypothetical. Again, I thank the panel. I'd like to thank Beth and Matilda from the City of Melbourne and the sustainability team for coordinating all of us, getting us ready, and so thank you for doing that. And as has already been presented, we're very proud that we have been selected as one of the inaugural resilience cities through the Rockefeller Foundation, and I know that there's workshops over the next couple of days, and we will learn more, because we know that as a city we definitely can't do this alone. As a state you can't do it alone, and as a community we can't do it alone, so we need to collaborate and work together, not just in the hypothetical but in the reality as well. So thank you again for your attendance, and hopefully you've enjoyed it.
So join me in thanking the panel. Thanks very much. Okay, so to bring the panel back into I'll just run through who they are, just so you can understand who is playing themselves. Kathy Oak. Ariel Liebman really is the Director of Carbon and Energy Programs at the Faculty of Information Technology at Monash University. Claire Johnson actually works for Lend-Lease down in Docklands. Terry Jones actually does work for SP AusNet. Well done. Dean Griggs works for City of Melbourne. Gary Stickland actually does work for Alto on Burke Street. Ian Shears does work for the City of Melbourne. Joel Princicula actually is a homeless person. And you told us, thank you for sharing what that actually means. A lot of us probably didn't know that. Mary Farrow actually does come from Emerald, and I hope she's not actually going to be camping down here anytime soon. Martin Dutch actually does work at Royal Melbourne Hospital. And Tony Murphy actually is the Deputy Fire Commissioner. So would you please all thank once again the members of the panel.